Specifically, what I'm going to do is show you a course that you're going to get access to this afternoon when we start working on the audit review component. We're going to go over some initial pieces, and then we're going to learn how to create accessible material, specifically an accessible document. That's what we're going to do this morning. And then we're going to apply those skill sets to what that does for the review process and how that informs that, and then the forms that you'll be using and that type of thing. But the reason why we're here specifically is we have, of course, an accessibility initiative. And this initiative is primarily the result of recommendations that were provided to the state legislature last year. The state legislature asked THEC to pull a task force together and have that task force then provide recommendations about how both the UT and the TBR system would meet its obligations for persons with disabilities. Now, I'm going to have the disability conversation here for just a moment, but in reality, I want to move away from that, because the more you design accessibly, the more you make the environment usable for everybody. It's not just persons with disabilities. It really does make a difference. So we had those recommendations. There are particular things that are going on because of that. And now we're in that process. Right now we're in the process of dealing with a sample audit. We already done a textbook audit. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now we're looking at doing a sample audit of 30 courses for each institution. The most enrolled, of course, kind of makes sense, who are going to impact the most. And then all we're looking to do is determine where we are right now. And at the same time, educate your team at the institution and you guys to help your other section individuals so they can audit their materials too for those 30 courses. And we can develop a process that will then help that skill set bleed out within the institution and be supported. We're also looking to develop some sort of resources that potentially might become scalable for the system. We know that you have some really good resources here at the institution here. You guys actually are out front in some of these cases. Thank you, David. So with that process, we're going to move on. I want to show you a video because I want you to understand that we are not alone. TBR is not the only system doing this. UT is not, or should we say both our systems aren't the only systems doing this. We just happen to be the only state that the two systems decided to try to do this at the same time. And of course that was because of THEC. And so now we're kind of setting a little bit of precedence in the rest of the United States. So be proud of that process. I mean, that's pretty amazing when you think about the rest of the nation. All the other systems came to it at different times in different places, especially out in California. But I will say this, we're very fortunate because we have a lot of those other systems are informing our process because they've been through this for quite a while. And so we're not going to also reinvent the wheel. So the first thing I'd like to do is give you the opportunity to hear what other campus leaders have to say about this process.
We are committed to the notion that everyone should have an opportunity to participate in higher education, whether it be from a learning perspective, a research perspective, or an opportunity to work here at this institution. We benefit from that because we get to enjoy the talents and the skills of those people who come in, and also their perspective, which in many cases will be different from the perspective of others on campus. And so accessibility becomes a very important value at the university.
Michael K. Young, President, University of Washington. Images of a teacher and students in classrooms and at computer stations. Text adjust through a CCTV. Words appear. IT accessibility, what campus leaders have to say. Tracy Matrano, Director of IT Policy, Cornell University.
We're a leading university globally. We want the best talent in the world for our students, our staff, and our faculty. And we want to be sure if that talent has a disability that they know that we are a welcoming community.
Pablo Molina.
And we're competing with other prestigious and highly accomplished institutions. We want to make sure that we can target the right candidates
Georgetown University
to join our community, regardless of their disability status.
Edward Wright.
In fact, we genuinely believe that
President.
Excellence is achieved through diversity,
University of Oregon.
and that a commitment to equity and inclusion really enriches each of our lives.
What the university offers and makes available has to be offered to everybody. We can't afford to waste the talents, the brilliance, or the minds of anybody. And making things accessible allows everybody to engage the university.
Think about accommodation as really the beginning of the conversation about disability. It was the appropriate measure that was taken in the Americans with Disabilities Act that was passed in 1990, and that's well over a generation ago. I think now we really have to think less about how we're going to measure specifically this accommodation or that accommodation, and recognize that we can make accessibility open and available so that individual staff, faculty, or students do not have to go to get an accommodation. It will be automatically available in the web page that they visit, in the device that they use.
Jerry Hanley,
The first step really needs to be an assessment
Senior Director,
of where we are.
Academic Technology
So we
Services.
can then inform our planning process, develop plans, implement a project, and then
California State University.
assess the results of it.
Key to our approach to making sure that our campus and our technology is accessible to people with disabilities is to ensure we do this by design. This is not an afterthought that we do after we have implemented a new classroom. Instead, this is something that we do from the initial conception of a new project or idea. The same way we do this for privacy and security, we do this for accessibility.
A policy really is an important way to go because it will focus everyone's attention. It's also probably the way that you have to go now that there are legal pressures on higher education in this area. The second thing I would say about policy is there are really two types in general. One is a policy that you have because you have a law, for example, the Family Education Rights Privacy Act policy. So you want to be clear and sure that you're going to have compliance on your campus. There's another kind of policy that I would call aspirational policy, and maybe accessibility fits a little bit in both, but you most certainly can err on the aspirational side. An aspirational policy is something you establish for your institution as a path moving towards something, moving forward. It does not have to have 100% compliance because it's really a direction that you're setting strategically for your institution.
We begin with our vendors saying, A, this is not only important, that this is required for working with the CSU. Every student who comes into our institution, we have to provide equally effective access to those services, and you are a partner in delivering those services to us. So we will tell you what we need, and then we will help you inform your staff, educate your staff, provide them some consultation and guidance in partnership with us so you can deliver the successful service for us.
Bruce Moss,
If we go about things on an ad hoc approach,
CIO and Vice Provost
we're not likely to get the same results.
for Information Technology.
We work together as a community in higher education to work with vendors to improve accessibility for everyone with regard to the products that are offered. That's a much more pragmatic approach rather than institution by institution.
University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Making accessibility a priority in their development roadmap is going to be driven by the market demand. And if an institution never says a word, the vendor isn't going to do anything about it. So if we begin to communicate our demands collectively, then the vendor will recognize the market value of accessibility.
Accessibility requires effort on the part of everyone in the higher education community, faculty, staff, technology vendors. If we all do our part, our institutions can provide everyone with an equal opportunity to participate. And we all benefit from the perspectives of a diverse group.
I would say to those out there who are just getting started or maybe struggling to figure out how to use technology to advance accessibility on their campuses, that there's no such thing as a bad time to start.
Words appear.
This video presentation was created as part of Access Computing, a collaboration of the DeWitt Center and the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington.
So as you can see, there's a whole group of institutions around the country already heading in this direction. A lot of what we have done so far in dealing with some of the forms, for instance, that we have provided, and we will be providing you the vendor product accessibility statement and documentation, and the A, C, C, and R form, or that is actually for conformance and remediation. those are actually adapted forms that came from CSU. Some of the models that we were promoting are CSU models. They have been emulated in other locations as well. So again, we aren't the only ones that are doing this process. We have lots of support. There are two things, and we'll talk about them further this afternoon, two main things to consider. One is what we have control over. But basically, there's only one thing that we have control over, and that is what we create. So whatever we create, we need to understand how to create it accessibly. The other is vendor materials, and I'm talking about the broadest sense of thinking of vendors. If you're from websites that you might decide to use all the way to a technology that you need to procure. All those pieces in between, we need to have conversations with those vendors to help them understand what we need in order to meet our obligations. That's it. That's all we need to do. Now I'll say this, California has really helped us. Anybody know where we are as far as systems standing in the United States? Anybody want to know? You do. Sixth. We're the sixth largest system in the United States right now. Sometimes it changes. So that's pretty good. We're very large. We have a lot of impact. Well, CSU, California Community Colleges, guess what their FTE is? Just take a wild guess. They have 114 institutions. Have an idea? Any? Actually, we're at over 200,000. Any? Okay. California Community Colleges FTE is 2.8 million. Full-time enrollees, 2.8 million. In disability studies, it's an average of 10% of your population is a person with a disability at your institution, whether they have identified themselves or not. So my colleagues in California are dealing with 280,000 persons with disabilities in their institutions. That's just amazing. That's huge. So, needless to say, of the top 6, we already have 4 making a concerted effort with the vendors to help them understand what we need from them. So we have this immense pressure now happening, and that's why we're beginning to see movement. We're actually beginning to see, for instance, Pearson work with the National Federation for the Blind to make sure my math lab is getting redesigned so it will be usable by persons with screen readers. So there's lots of movement. So I want you to understand that we are not in this by ourselves. We have a whole lot of support. And the more each of us speak to those representatives and deliver them the forms that we need, and we get those and we upload them, the better they're going to understand that this is an obligation that they do have to meet. Because sooner or later we will have to make a decision. There was a product that Todd Blankenbeckler and I worked on with the developers, worked on with the lead developers, called SoftChalk. Anybody familiar with SoftChalk? Okay, we worked with them for 2.5 years, trying to help them understand where we needed to be with that product. We knew that it was capable with HTML5 to move forward and actually do some of the things needed to happen in order for a person to have an assistive technology work with it. Well, 2.5 years later, they still hadn't done it, so Patrick Wilson finally said, that's enough. No more. ROCC is not going to use this anymore. And so he went ahead and canceled the contract with them. Guess what? They now have 7 items of their 17 that were inaccessible done. Literally 7 months later. So yes, that type of leverage does make a difference. And so that's where we are. So when you're having these conversations, think about that. But that's the future. Now I want to get away from all this legal language stuff and reference and everything else. And I really want to talk about the meat of the matter, and that is really dealing with usability. Accessibility, of course, is a huge component of it. First, what you're looking at here is a course that I will give you access to this afternoon as we go over accessibility audit review process. This course is actually literally, it has a sequence. If you start with the actual introduction and then you go through creating, and then after that, and all this is for your resources. This is a deeply curated course for you to be able to go back. This is an introduction. This course, it takes 16 weeks at least to try to teach the materials in it, if not longer. There's lots of materials in here for your resources so you can review them, and we'll go over some of those today. But specifically, Right here, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust are actual principles in dealing with accessible design to standard. Those are standard principles for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which actually just should be called Accessibility Guidelines, because it applies to web, to documents, to software. And then this is specifically for you guys and how we're going to do this. We will go over this afternoon. So we have lots of other information in here. We have statement and definitions. We have the standards. We have legal references. The standards we have adopted from the recommendations from THEC are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 A and AA. But that's in this course, so you don't have to write it down. You can go back and reference it under standards. The other is Accessibility Guidelines for EPUB 3. And that goes a little further than the 2.0, and it deals with some of that interactivity in dealing with textbooks. And it's specifically for textbooks. Then we also have adopted the refresh of 508, which is supposed to harmonize the 2.0 A and AA. 508 is now an old standard. So if you want to bury your heads in the standards, you can go right here to do that. But that's really not what we want to talk about today. Those are the standards you want to reference. And I will have a rubric for you to actually send to vendors if you wish, if they come back to you, but we'll talk about that later. So, the first thing I want to talk about today is specifically dealing with accessibility and accommodation.